Spellbreak is a battle royale that you've got to try out if you haven't already. It's free to play, and if you've played the game, then you know how polished it is. But aside from using elemental magic instead of the usual guns you'd find in other battle royales, one of the biggest things that sets it apart is that Spellbreak isn't just a battle royale. Soon it'll be expanding into team deathmatch and testing out other game modes. So if you're not a big fan of the battle royale genre, this game could still be for you. Another cool feature is how players can combine these magical elements to create interesting and powerful combos. So today, we're going to look at all these elemental combos in the game, and at the end of the video, I'm going to share some of my favorite builds for practicing the combos and matches. You can find the basics on what each gauntlet does in my complete intro to Spellbreak, but for brevity, I'm going to skip past that in this video. So if you don't know what the gauntlets do, then give that intro video a watch, since it'll cover all that in depth, along with some rarely mentioned stats and tricks to help out more seasoned players. But for now, back to the elements. There's a table of contents here and in the description to guide you if you want to skip to a specific element. So let's look at the interactions with Ice Element first. If the Ice Gauntlet is your primary gauntlet, then you're going to be able to start a lot of elemental interactions. This is because the primary attack, Ice Lance, will cause you to leave behind ice trails, which can be interacted with by every other element to make something happen. After a few seconds, the ice trails turn into water before disappearing, which changes some of the interactions. When interacting with lightning, the ice and water trails will become shocked, preventing anyone who walks on them from being able to attack for 2 seconds. Stone will cause ice trails to turn into frozen mist, which will slow run speed by 50% and freeze targets after 2 seconds. If the ice is melted and become water, then stone just causes it to disappear. Wind will also cause ice trails to turn into frozen mist and water trails to disappear, but since wind hits a smaller area, stone's going to get rid of the trails faster. Fire will interact the same way with both ice and water trails, creating a steam cloud. The steam doesn't do any damage, but it can obstruct vision, making it a bit harder for enemies to aim at you. It can also be frozen to create cover. Toxic attacks will create toxic puddles on the ground when they hit ice and water trails, and shooting a toxic puddle with Ice Lance will freeze it over so it doesn't do damage when frozen, but can still interact with some other elements, such as fire. If you freeze toxic clouds or toxic puddles, it'll pause their timer, so once they unfreeze, they won't immediately disappear. But actually, if you hit a toxic cloud with an ice spell while an enemy is inside the cloud, instead of freezing the cloud, it'll turn the entire cloud into a frozen mist. Ice Lance and Fireballs from the Fire Gauntlet will cancel each other out if they collide in the air, and Ice Attacks will put out fire patches on the ground. The Stone Shaper sorcery, Boulder Fall, can be thrown through the Frostborn sorcery, Flash Freeze, or shot with an Ice Lance to create a frozen boulder. It doesn't do extra damage, but leaves a patch of frozen mist that'll freeze targets after 2 seconds. Now, onto the lightning interactions. Unlike Frost, these are extremely straightforward. When you're interacting with ice trails, wind tornadoes, toxic puddles, or toxic clouds, it'll add the shock status effect to them, causing the target to be unable to attack for 2 seconds. Unfortunately, that's pretty much all there is for lightning combos. Looking at the stone element, the Shockwave basic spell on the Stone Gauntlet will interact with the flame walls and fire on the ground to make a sort of lava fissure on the ground. It also adds a damage over time effect to the regular Shockwave basic attack. As mentioned previously, hitting a Boulder Fall sorcery with ice attacks will make a frozen boulder, but you can also hit it with a fire attack to make a flaming boulder. This will not add damage to the initial impact, but leave a smoldering patch on the ground that does some damage over time. In general though, neither of these are really that useful. You can also accelerate or change the trajectory of a boulder by hitting it with Wind Shear, which is the Tempest basic attack spell. Again, stone attacks turn ice trails into freezing mist, cancel out water trails, and they also cancel out toxic puddles. So that's all there is for stone interactions. Now for wind. Wind will make fire walls and patches of fire on the ground disappear, and dissipate steam and toxic clouds after a few hits. It causes the ice trails to turn into frozen mist, as mentioned, and it causes toxic puddles to explode into gas clouds. This essentially doubles the damaging area of toxic puddle, and makes it so that stone attacks no longer cancel their effect. The wind sorcery, Tornado, can be hit with fire, toxic, or lightning to create an elemental tornado. The fire and toxic tornadoes will do damage over time, and the lightning will apply the shock effect, but do no damage. The fire tornado will do 5 damage per tick, but they have to be pretty much in the center of the tornado to take damage. A toxic tornado, on the other hand, will do 4 damage per tick, but has way more range, so it's generally better. Hitting a fire tornado with toxic attacks, or vice versa, will cause a fire and toxic interaction that deals huge damage immediately to anyone in the middle of the tornado, or in the air above it. It's subtle, but there are 3 explosions that can each land a hit. This makes it difficult for me to calculate it exactly, but it's reasonably somewhere between 40 and 70 damage that you can hit with, depending on how high they are above the tornado and the damage over time from the tornado. Now, let's cover the fire elemental interactions. When contacting ice trails, fire will turn into steam. When contacting a boulder, it'll become a burning boulder that will leave a patch of fire on the ground, as mentioned before. Toxic puddles will become green flames when hit by fire, doing 20 damage per tick, approximately 40 damage per second. If fire touches a toxic cloud, it'll explode, doing around 40 damage immediately. Stone Gauntlet Shockwave will become a burning shockwave, dealing damage over time to targets hit. If you hit a tornado with fire attacks, it'll become a fire tornado. Fire Gauntlet basic spells and Frost Gauntlet basic spells will cancel each other out, and ice spells will put out flames on the ground. And finally, we come to the toxic element. So toxic has similar interactions to fire. It'll create a toxic puddle on the ground if it hits an ice trail, even if you're using it as an offhand gauntlet. When the basic attack spells for toxic hits flames, the flames will turn green and do 20 damage per tick, and hitting flames with a toxic cloud will cause a combustion reaction that does 40 damage immediately. Hitting steam with the toxic spray basic spell will create a small toxic cloud, but unfortunately this can't be used with the toxicologist skill to gain a free dash and invisibility. Toxic attacks contacting a tornado will turn it into a toxic tornado, and hitting toxic puddles with the wind gauntlet basic attack, wind shear, will create a toxic mist dealing 6 damage per tick in a fairly large area. Interestingly, if you hit a toxic puddle that's on top of an ice trail, it'll make a toxic cloud instead of toxic mist. The difference here is that Toxic Cloud can be frozen, and it can also be combusted by fire attacks. So if there are any other elemental combos I didn't mention, for example fire and lightning, then I left them out because there are no interactions between them. Now, before we end, I want to share a few builds designed to make the most use of elemental interactions. Since the focus here is elemental combos, all 3 of these builds are going to be using the Spellslinger talent to allow you to equip more gauntlets in your inventory slots and therefore get more diverse elemental combos off. They'll also be using Fortitude and Recovery talents. It's better to use defensive talents in an elemental combo build since the combo damage won't increase with gauntlet rarity. And since we're using these builds to practice combos, we want to stay alive as long as possible. The 3 builds are Toxicologist, Tempest, and Frostborn. Each will be running fire in the offhand gauntlet slot. The Toxicologist build will include wind in the inventory slot, and the Tempest build will include toxic in the inventory slot. This allows you to combo between these 3 elements to get those exploding tornadoes we talked about earlier. The Frostborn build will use toxic and fire. You'll be able to create toxic puddles on the ground because of your ice trails, and since the toxic puddle cooldown pauses when the puddle is frozen, it'll last a very long time. It also gives you the added bonus of deterring enemies from following you when you use your ice trails to run away, and you can combust the puddles with fire to deal huge burst damage. If there's a specific elemental combo you like, or if I missed any combos, then let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching guys, and I hope to see you in the next one.